Hi, I'm Deborah Fine, and this is my studio. It's a wonderful studio. It's about 600 square feet, and it's really nicely lit. Even though the light is from the south, it's still got a lot of windows and wonderful light above. So these are some of my paintings. I thought you might like to see paintings in different stages of completion. So I've hung up paintings that I've just started, which is over here. I thought I might do a diptych, so I started this. And paintings that are in the process, which are over here. So this one.
Let's stay with this one.
Okay.
What have you done? Why do you like what you've done? What
I haven't done much of anything with this. I often start with red. For some reason, I begin with red, even if the painting never has any red in it, and ultimately. It's the first color that I use, unless I'm in a different kind of mood. I start with red. And then red affects the colors that you put on top of it. So it impacts on the oranges and the greens and the grays and the blues. So I like to start with red, and that's where I began this one.
Is there anything here that you might want to keep?
I don't know that. That's a process that I figure out as I'm going. It feels like it is, but it could disappear. I could end up not even seeing it. I'm thinking, oh, I forgot how I started that painting. Sometimes I can tell when I look at the sides, because you see the red coming here, or the black going someplace, and and then you get, oh yeah, that's right, I put red there, but it's all gone now. So that's what I start with, and then this piece is quite a bit further along. And this piece, if you get close to it, you can see that it has a lot of texture in it. There is a lot of medium, very sandy kind of finish in parts of this, and some parts that have none, like down here, that has none. I like the contrast. I feel like the texture moves you around, keeps you interested. It goes from textured to simple to clean to crisp, and then back to texture. So this is all flat here, although there's lots of layers and you see the paint coming through and all of the layers coming through. You don't see the same texture that you do right here. This is the biggest contrast of it. There's none here and there's lots of it here. There's none here and there's lots here. You can see all that.
You said this is a work in progress. What do you think you're going to have to work on here?
Everything. It's hard to say, to answer that question, because once you do something to it, once I do something to it, that requires something else to get done. And that's a continuing process until you get to the point where, or until I get to the point where I look at it and I say there's nothing left to do. And that's the whole creative process for me.
Well, where are you going to start? Are you going
I have to sit down and look at it for about a half an hour, and then I decide. Sometimes I spend the entire day in the studio and I don't do anything. Sometimes I spend the entire day in the studio, and once I'm done, I erase it all because I don't like it. So I don't always move forward. Sometimes moving forward requires just sitting and looking at it and deciding.
So this is a work in progress, although it may be completely done.
No, it's not completely done. This is a work in progress.
And so so my question again is, if it's a work in progress and it's not done, what is it about this that you feel you need to work on?
Well, if you want to sit down with me for about a half an hour, we can just stare at it and I can tell you. But there are, it just needs more. It needs something. I'll figure it out. Maybe I'll figure it out before we leave here. It needs direction. I like that most of my paintings have lines in them. At the end, I like to put lines and directional lines so that I tell the people, the viewer, where to start and where to go and where to continue, and then to come down and then to come back up here and to start all over again. And hopefully during that process, they're discovering new elements of the painting. So this needs directional line.
And do you have an idea now where you'd like to direct them?
No,
Okay, good.
no, not yet.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll be doing a painting and I'll set it up this way, and by the time I'm done, I realize it needs to turn. This is the top and that's the bottom, and I figure that out at the very last minute.
Okay.
So, for instance, this one was horizontal. It was horizontal for a very long time. Now, as you can see, it's vertical. And I'm feeling it's a vertical painting. I feel where you enter the painting here, and you come across, and then you come down. It doesn't work as well when you turn it horizontally. So that could happen to this. Although this is the same, since it's square, it's always going to be horizontal and vertical at the same time. So that's a little bit more complete than this one. Then there's this one, which I've been working on for a very, very, very long time. And I'm just starting to feel like it's coming together. I feel like this section up here needs work. It's not complete. It's too dense. I need more layers so I can see through them. And that's always one of the things I like about my paintings, or for me, I like them. So you can see there's a color on top, there's another color underneath, there's another color below that, and all of these layers give me interest and excite me. And you also can see all of the directional lines that I've put in this one already.
Go back.
So here, you've got the directional lines here, down here.
Do them again.
I've got it coming up here.
Right.
I've got them coming over here also, and then the one that's coming up goes up here. It originally went all the way up, and I didn't care for that, so that's why I say I change them all the time. And usually the very last thing I do on a painting is sit down with a pencil or a pastel or something crayon, and that's the last thing I do, and then it's complete. So this one needs a lot more work up here, and different layers coming around up here. And then I think after that, if I can get that where I want it to be, I think that one should be finished. And then this one is the one piece that I have here that is complete. Everything else that I have that's complete is at the gallery right now, or at least every other painting that's complete is at the gallery. I have one pastel here that is complete as well. And this was in one of my shows. This was in a show two shows last year. One of my most favorite paintings, and I don't know why it hasn't sold. I sold like 6 pieces, and this is the only one that hasn't sold, and that makes me happy because then I get to hang it up in the studio and refer to it, because it's always speaking to me and telling me, you know, what it was that I felt was successful about this one and what I might need to do with that one. So it's a good thing to have.
Let's go through this one. What do you like about it?
Well, I come in this painting here, and then this black mark down here moves me down there, and the lines move me down there, and the direction of the brush strokes move me down there, and the direction of the dripping moves me down here, and then the red pulls my eye over here. You can't help but see the red. And then I dripped vertically, you know, because I turn my canvases a lot while I'm working, to bring my eye up here. And I also bring the eye up here with the white. But there's so many colors in this gray. There's so many greens and rusts and blues and grays and speckles that you can see if you come really close to this. You can see all these little speckles in here, and all of that texture gives this interest for me. And then this up here, the yellow part, brings me back over down to that. And it's a journey. And I like to take people on a journey. And that's what I feel this does successfully. So that's why it's one of my favorite pieces. So I'm glad to have it at home in my studio. So in order to do all of this, these are the tools that I use. These are my painting tools. I have a lot of color here. And I never use a color right out of the jar or right out of the tube. I always mix it. I always make it a little bit different. I don't want plain cadmium red. I don't want plain cadmium red medium. I mix it with a little bit of this or a little bit of that to create a color that is unique to my painting. And then all of my extra jars that I'm already done using is I put the paint that I just mixed in here, and I put the formula on the front of the jar. So it tells me that I used Payne's Gray and Bone Black and et cetera, so that when I go to mix this again, I'll know exactly what I have to put in here, although it takes a long time to get it exactly the same, but I know what's in there. So all of these over here are custom. These are all things that I have made with all of the paints that I've got here. And then I've got lots of heavy gels and coarse molding paste and absorbent ground and light molding paste. And all of these are what makes these textures. All of this is what makes this stuff happen with different textures and in here with different textures. All of that comes from these particular molding pastes and that sort of thing. I also use, in addition to the heavy acrylics, I use fluid acrylics. And then I have all of these mediums. I love airbrush medium. Airbrush is like, this is my favorite thing ever. It's when you first start painting with acrylics, you have a tendency to want to put your brush in the water and you make the paint more fluid, but then that disperses all of the pigment, so it doesn't come out right. So, but airbrush medium is pretty much like milk. It's the consistency of skim milk. So it's very much like what you would get if you put your brush in water. And I love airbrush medium. I use this, well, I'll show you over there. I right now have 2 gallons, and I've got a half a gallon here, and I go through at least 6 or so gallons a year. I buy these in bulk. And I also use open medium, which gives you a different texture. I use acrylic glazing liquid, which now has a new name. I can't remember what they're calling it now, but it's some other glazing liquid. And then I have the polymer gloss medium. I use this. It dries a little bit faster and has a different texture than the acrylic glazing liquid. So I mostly use those. Sometimes I use matte medium, but it's not often. Most of the time I use the glosses. And that's
And the brushes and your...
the brushes. I love brushes. I take very good care of my brushes. My family used to be in the brush business, so I know how to take care of a brush. I have a brush here that is 5 years old. No, maybe 10 years old. It is just as buoyant and has the same kind of memory as the exact same brush that is less than a year old, because I clean my brushes really, really good. I wash them at least 2 times in regular soap, and then I wash them at least 1 time in the soap that's made to clean brushes, and then I dry them flat. I don't like to dry them like this, because then the water gets into the ferrule, and the ferrule gets into this, et cetera, so that's not good. So, and then I also have some brushes that are just strange, so they make funny kind of textures. I'm not sure exactly what these were used for. I bought them at a thrift store, but I like the fact that I can use this and create some of the texture that I've got on here. So that's those. And I like these. I don't know if everybody uses these. If you use oil paint, you don't have to worry about it drying. It takes a long time to dry. But if you use acrylic, it'll dry for you in no time, depending upon the medium you put in here. So this is a box that has a sponge at the bottom and you wet the sponge. You put water in here so the whole box gets wet, and you put your palette in there and you close it up, and you can come back here a week later and your paint will still be wet, and you'll still be able to use the exact same color that you were using when you left last week.
You got your palette knives?
Yeah, I would like it if they made bigger ones. This is the largest one I've got. I mostly mix with this one. I paint with these. And that's my palette knives. And then the rest of this is all my rabbits.
What about the drippings and all that?
So when I'm painting, what I'll generally do, let's talk about this because it has a lot of dripping on it. So if I'm painting and I want something to drip in a certain way, I'll put it down on the ground. I put the paint on it the way I want it, and then if I want it to drip that way, I'll hold it up this way, and I pound it until it goes exactly the way I want it to, and then I dry it lying flat. When I come back into my studio the next morning, generally speaking, everything is on the floor, because everything was wet when I left. So that dries flat. And then I put another color on top of it. What led me down the path to becoming an artist? Did I have artistic strengths growing up? I started my art practice when I was in junior high school. Actually, probably even elementary school. I went to school with a kid who always was an incredible artist, and I always tried to be as good as he was. And as it turns out, he became a very big deal graphic artist. So I think I was attracted to it even in elementary school. But I started my real art practice in high school. I started with a pretty well-known portrait painter, and so I learned I learned how to draw from him, and even paint. I did some oil painting in high school. And how long did it take me to establish my style? I would say about 73 years. So I'm just starting to feel like I've established a style. What attracted me to abstract painting versus figurative? So my first 50 years or so, I was a figurative painter. I learned from my portrait painter figurative art. I went to Carnegie Mellon. I continued with figurative art. It didn't even occur to me to attempt to do abstract art. It was just too out there for me. I didn't know what to do with it. Then I took a long vacation raising my children, and when I went back to art, I took a class. Without reading the syllabus, I just took a class in pastels. And when I got to the class, I found out it was an abstract pastel class. And I started doing abstract work, and I just loved it, and I haven't questioned it since then. I haven't done any realistic work since then. So the next question was, many of my pieces are mixed media. And what particular mediums do I enjoy working with most? I enjoy all of them. That's why I use mixed media. I do a lot of the painting, I've done all of the painting with acrylics. But I have pastels that I use with it. I use it with graphite, pencils, crayons, all sorts of things. And different medium give me different effects. And if I didn't have all of them, then I wouldn't be able to create the work that I'm doing. So I don't enjoy one more than the other. I enjoy all of them together. That's what makes my work look the way it is. When using pastels versus acrylics, do I feel like I'm capturing or communicating different things, and do I have a preference? I prefer painting. Only recently do I prefer painting because I feel like I've gotten to the point where I can do what I want with the painting. And the more I paint, the less I want to do my pastels. My pastels are softer and simpler and not as many layers and textures in them as paint can create. So I do like painting more, but I like pastels. They're a nice little way to sketch, a nice way to wait for my for my acrylic paintings to dry. So I do them both. Pastels are also very dirty, so I like to do them in the spring or the summer when the windows are open and I don't have all this pastel floating around my studio and getting in my nose. Next question was, when using a similar color palette across paintings, what's your method for creating different feelings? I'm not sure I can answer that question. It just happens. I put a mark on a canvas, and that mark requires a different mark, and I would never be able to put that same mark on a second canvas. The mark that I put on the other canvas, which is the same color palette, is going to be different, and so that's going to require something else. And it's always a different feeling. Every painting is going to have a different feeling. There's no way in the world somebody can copy an abstract painting. I think you can copy a realistic painting a lot more easily, but not an abstract. The next question, what inspired your most recent paintings? I think that every time I start a painting, it's a process of creativity. I don't know in advance what I'm going to do. If I knew in advance what I was going to do, then I think that would take the creativity out of it for me. So nothing inspired those paintings. Those paintings happen, and sometimes I feel like they're happening through me, as if I don't have control over it. It speaks to me and it tells me where to go and it tells me what to do. And that's what my work looks like. And it's, just continues to grow and change based on things that I learn from doing a painting. So if I learn that I can use this much medium with this much pigment and this much acrylic gloss or whatever, and that's going to create a specific texture, then I learn something new. Then that thing that I learned new in painting A goes into painting B, and then painting B I'll learn something that'll end up in painting C. So as I continue to paint, I learn every time I'm painting. Can you tell us about the titles of your work? They just come to me. I hear something and I write it down. I read something and I write it down. And when I can't find something that's appropriate, I ask Howie what he thinks. And he always comes up with something. And between the two of us, we enjoy naming the paintings. I started thinking about not naming the paintings, and then I poo-pooed that, and I decided, no, I need to name them so I could tell which one's which. What's the most important thing in my studio? Well, it's space and light. I can't paint large if I'm in a small space, and I need a lot of light. The lights that I have here were recommended to me because the studio supplies fluorescent fixtures. They were recommended to me by a friend of mine who's in the film industry, and he said that these are lights that will create daylight, not the kind that you get at Home Depot, but really this is what they use in the film industry. And it really does create a daylight feel in here. I have some other bulbs over in my storage area, and they're very different in light. So I love the light and I love the space. And who are a few of my favorite artists? That's a hard one because I love almost every artist. Every artist it gets into my head and impacts on something I'm going to do eventually. But when I first got into abstract painting, Cy Twombly was very important to me. Most recently, Julie Muritu is very important to me. I love how she breaks things apart and puts things back together, And although my work is much more organic and hers is much more structural, she inspires me. Have I ever done a commission? Yes, I have done a commission, and it was a little bit nerve-wracking. I was afraid that she wouldn't like it, and she loved it, and so I'm very happy. I'm always happy to do a commission now. It's a challenge because you want to make sure that you like it as the artist and that your client likes it. So you don't want to have to compromise, because if you're going to compromise, then I think I'm just, I wouldn't be happy with that experience. Have I ever participated in a residency? Yes, I had got a fellowship to the Vermont Studio Center up in Vermont, obviously. It was wonderful. Spent a month just painting and didn't have to think about anything else. It was exceptional. And I still am friends with a lot of the people who were there that month, so we still get in touch with each other. What are my thoughts about female representation in the art world? I think it's just now beginning to explode. I think it's a long time coming. The thought that in the Impressionists era, you could think of one artist that was a female is just ridiculous. There were so many of them, but they weren't noticed, and they weren't put up in in shows. But now it's getting to be important. So I love Jenny Saville. I love Julia Meritu, and there's so many others. They're just fabulous, and I'm very excited that those are two of the highest paid living artists around. So good for them. Have I ever purchased artwork? Somebody wants to know that. Of course. We have a lot of artwork in our house. We have Mo Brooker, we have Francis DeFranzo, I have Bruce Samuelson, I've got Donna Quinn, I have Mary Nomikis, Vincent DiSiderio, Alex Konevsky. I can't even, I'm afraid I may. Louise, oh yeah, Louise Strawbridge. I have two pieces from Louise. I'm going over the whole space in my head. I think that might be most everybody. I have two pieces in my desk area. One of them, I don't know the name. She was a German artist. She did pastels, and another one is very small. Oh, and what's the printmaker that we have three of? I can't remember his name. I love his name, his work. Anyway, so we have that. We have a lot of it. And has your practice been affected by the coronavirus? Fortunately, no, because I have this private space. So it's just like being at home, and nobody else has been here except my husband, who's holding the camera. So, no. When I come in here, I am fortunate enough to forget what's going on outside. And until I have to leave this room and put on gloves and put on a mask, I'm good. I'm very happy here. So that's it. That's all I've got for you. That was all your questions, and I hope you learned a little bit about what I do, and I hope you'll come and see the show when this ridiculous virus just goes away. We can all enjoy ourselves again and see some art. You can see art online too. You can go to Stanek Gallery and see all of the show online. It's all there. It's really wonderful. So thank you so much.